Okay. I think we're set to start. We are on the second part of studying, second class period of studying Ecclesiastes. And so, here we go. Here's a review question. I'm going to throw some pop quizzes at you this morning. What does Hebel mean?
Irrelevant.
Irrelevant. Okay.
Smoke.
Smoke. Okay. The picture was kind of a clue. What else? Well,
That's
in a variety of
sorry. I didn't hear the question, but pictures.
what does Hebel mean? In a variety of versions or translations of the Bible, it's translated as vanity, like the ESV, the NRSV, King James, etc. It's translated as futility in a couple of other versions and meaningless in the NIV. So it just simply has been translated in a variety of ways. And Old Testament uses of the word include vanity, breath, idols, vain, worthless, false, nothing, empty, gained hastily, and vapor. So you hit at least a couple of the primary ones there. So that was the first pop quiz for the morning. So here's the second one. How many hymns in Community of Christ Sings are based on Ecclesiastes? And you have a choice: none, 1, 3, 5, or 7.
I'm gonna go with
Okay.
7.
7? Okay. Anybody else want to?
I would agree with 7.
7? Okay.
Quick, go get the hymnal. No, I need my.
No, don't get the
I need
hymnal.
my reference.
So
Yeah, I don't know why this won't adjust, but
I guess I didn't even notice the thing was out of focus. Almost okay. We'll get ourselves adjusted here.
okay, now what, tell me where to go.
Dorothy and Ryan on there.
I know.
Is that better?
I failed.
Right there?
Don't know my indexes.
Is that okay?
Okay, we are now in focus, so now we can proceed.
Sorry.
So
Read it off after.
I heard 2 votes for 7. 3 votes for 7.
None.
It should be 7 since 7's a religious number.
Well, Jane said none. Anybody else want
I
to
say
take 1,
none
3, or
because
5?
It's too sad.
Pardon?
We don't have sad hymns.
Okay.
There's at least one in there. Turned about
You could have
times for a season.
Oh,
Okay, here's your answer.
I don't know.
None.
I
What
don't
about
agree
the-
with that. There's a hymn in there that talks about
All right.
Look in the index.
I will go get it.
maybe they just.
I'll be happy to be proved wrong, but
Well, let's see. You have a long memory. There may be previous hymnals that had a
Which-
song.
which brings us to the next point.
Yeah.
Hymns of the Saints. There are 2 songs in Hymns of the Saints. Oh, Jesus, the giver of all we enjoy, and the Lord our God alone is strong. And if you go back one more to the Saints hymnal, I think there are 5.
Mm.
So we are moving away from being a depressing church. So,
That's one way to put it. I
what's another
don't,
way.
introspective.
Okay,
Yes, I like that.
so we're moving towards or away from being introspective.
Well, I mean, I get, no, I don't want to derail this, but there's different ways of interpreting the mood, I guess.
Yeah, when you take a look at Ecclesiastes and look at specific versions, there are many of our hymns that really reference, talks about the beauty of creation, that sort of thing. And all of that is in Ecclesiastes, but it's not a main theme. And for whatever reason, unless Jane proves me wrong here, there are no references to Ecclesiastes as far as the scripture goes for specific hymns within them.
Mhm.
So wasn't that bird's song turn, turn, turn from Ecclesiastes, or am I getting the wrong chapter?
That's true, but it's
That's-
not.
That's true.
No, it's not a hymn.
But isn't there, I still think isn't there a hymn that talks about it?
There's Lamentations. Is that what one you're thinking of? And hang on, I'm looking.
For
He's
everything,
looking.
there is a season.
Yeah.
You think,
No, I'm sorry, Dennis, there are none.
So Jane was right. There are none.
But it has Lamentations, so the whole sad thing. Lamentations is pretty
Yeah.
sad.
Okay, so here's another question for you.
On turn, turn.
Why
Oh, I never heard of this version.
why do you think Ecclesiastes was added to the canon of Old Testament scripture?
I've often wondered that.
Okay. By the way, anybody who came in late, there's a handout,
oh, I'll take one too.
and I don't know who else.
Back here. I, in my DSS thing, it says almost all the prophets that after whoever wrote the Ecclesiastes quote him. And he's supposed to be so wonderful. By the time I read like halfway through it, I was so depressed. I thought, why is this here? But okay,
Yeah.
Well,
that's all
Solomon,
I'll say about that.
well, Solomon was attributed for his wisdom, so he's. At least. I think we can know the author.
Okay.
He talks about locusts.
And there were a lot of locusts.
There's a lot of locusts in there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it was a problem for them back then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I forgot to research that question, so I'm going to speculate. Well, it could be based on who wrote it was some revered figure, but we don't know the author. So my other speculation is that it's a counterbalance to some of the optimism or naivete of Proverbs. Just like Job was, in my opinion, a counterbalance. You know, the sugar in my coffee is a counterbalance to the bitterness, and the bitterness is a counterbalance to the sweet. So
Okay. That's a good point.
I do think some people learn from the don'ts as well as the do's, you know?
Okay.
I mean, you think about the different kinds of preachers in our world today, and definitely when we were growing up, that say, I just remember the song, don't do this and don't do that. You know, we heard it all of our lives.
Yeah.
And so the darkness is there. So this is, you know, I like how Ryan says that we need to be aware of it.
I like that. I like that too. Any other?
Forgot about that song.
Yeah, sorry, it popped into my head.
Maybe I should. If I were not up on the stage.
If I were not up on the stage, something else I'd like to be. It's a campfire song. I don't know.
My favorite verse
Pass
is,
that on over to Karen
and you
there.
just go, hey,
Oh my gosh, I don't know that one. We definitely need a campfire. Stay tuned, we're gonna have a campfire for church. And we're
Okay.
doing that song. You're doing that song.
Okay, well, just to give a couple examples. Some of the commentators, some of the commentaries say it gives Christians a chance to see the world through the eyes of a very wise person. Now, you have to keep in mind, the assumption is that Ecclesiastes, along with Proverbs, was written by Solomon, as well as Song of Songs or Song of, you know, Song of Psalms. Anyhow, those three, the traditional view is those three were written by Solomon. And so one reason that it could be included in the canon is because there was this assumption that Solomon wrote it or associated with it, etc. So, And he's considered to be a very, very wise person. It also, the preacher, Colette, he takes worldly pleasure, explores it, and finds none of it has lasting meaning. So it's trying to reflect what many people find, that, you know, you can seek after wisdom, you can seek after pleasure, and somehow it doesn't always give you a meaning in life. So that's another reason for it to be included. We seek meaning in life, and the search takes us on a winding road of ups and downs filled with the aha moments that illuminate, then fade. And so it's trying to address that situation where we think we're at a mountaintop experience, and all of a sudden we're down in the valley. And Ecclesiastes tells of a man who lived through the process, and out of the other side was a wiser, more seasoned perspective. Okay. And his conclusion, and if you look at the handout, handout.
Mary needs one.
Okay, I'm out of them, so unfortunately. So if you look at the handout, you'll see that it goes through kind of 3 phases, where you have an introduction, and then he's testing. He's looking for answers, and at the very end, he comes back with a conclusion. And the conclusion is, fear God. You know, all the earthly acquirements, all the things that you achieve, fade. But the one thing that is important is to fear God and follow the law. And it's interesting also that in one commentary, it talks about fearing God for the non-believer is judgment. Fearing God for the believer is a matter of reverence. So I tried that out on my wife, and she didn't buy it. But so I'll just simply share that with all of you, and you can decide to accept it or not. So
Yeah.
Oh, I'll go back for a second. Any comments on any of those? Frankly, I like Ryan's interpretation best. That is the bitter and the sweet, and they contrast, and they really reflect life, both the bitter and the sweet.
Yeah. And another possible way to look at it is, what is your timeline? You know, are you looking at there's a lot of short-term pleasures that are undeniably good, but 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now, you know, it's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when I've had disagreements with my children, I've said at the very end, I've said to them, you know, in 100 years, how much difference is this going to make? I mean, on trivial things.
How's that go for it?
They
for
probably
you?
said that's.
It works real well. They think I'm a real wise man.
Thanks, Dad. You just trivialized my problem.
No, that's not quite the situation, but
There's a sign on my refrigerator that says if it doesn't matter in eternity, it doesn't matter.
yeah. Okay, so now you come to your homework assignment. I have no idea why, not now. Our computer has a mind of its own. We have to keep it in check every once in a while. So your homework assignment was, what are your favorite or most meaningful quotes from the book of Ecclesiastes? Who has one?
The only one that I remember is vanity, vanities, all vanity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Which, according to the definitions we looked at earlier, could also mean vapor, all this vapor.
I like the one that is for every time there is a season,
Okay.
and that little, well, it goes back to quotes. Or Pete Seeger, whoever. That's where I first learned about that one.
Any others?
Chapter 1, verse 18, for much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow.
Chapter 10, verse 11. If a snake bites its charm, if a snake bites before it is charmed, the snake charm loses its teeth.
This is his fee.
Mhm.
We're gonna come back and discuss some of those. Maybe not the snake charmer one, but
Okay, how about this one then? Wisdom is better than possessions and advantage. You all who see the sun, better have wisdom behind you than money. Wisdom profits men by giving life to those who know it.
that's a good one. Any others from the back row? You have to speak up because I can't always hear you back there. So. Okay,
I'll offer one. I'm not in the
Sure.
back row, but a very short one is Ecclesiastes 5:2 says, "Let thy words be few." Period.
Don't elaborate on that.
Nope.
I'm trying to figure out if Ryan's trying to tell me something.
So mine was Ecclesiastes 3. 1 through 8.
Okay.
Are you gonna read it for us? I can.
How about we go to it and show you on the screen?
Oh,
Here's 3, 1 through 8.
Yeah.
there it is.
You want to read it or you want to hear?
I'll read. Oh, let's hear the person. Oh, it's not the English.
It's
guy.
not the British guy. Sorry.
Okay, I'll read what I have. For
Okay.
everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
Coral, what version is yours?
NRSV updated
And this
version.
is NIV. International version. So they're very close, of
They're
course.
close, they're close.
Yeah,
So let's take one or two of these phrases.
Mhm.
What's this bit about a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them? Why would you scatter stones?
Well, they did have stonings up until the New Testament.
Okay,
Oh,
Is it a metaphor for scattering your followers,
it could be.
send them out into the world and then call them back later?
Sure, it could be.
I wonder if it's an agricultural reference.
yeah, I was
What?
thinking more of a gardening kind of a thing.
yeah,
Sometimes,
you want to get rid of your stones so you can.
yeah.
Well, actually, it is. And the reference is to if you have a neighbor who is displeasing you and giving you grief, you go and scatter stones in
You give them
their
your stones.
fields to make it more difficult for them. And of course, when you go to harvest or when you go to plant, you gather the stones.
Yeah,
And so at least some commentators use that as the
There's some
reference.
cruelty in this one.
yeah, I know. It says a time to hate.
Well, you have to keep in
You have
mind.
to, you have to, you have to
Yeah,
actually say,
I got an idea.
Go ahead. Or
To me, it was, back in those times, it was more of a nomadic kind of society. And scattering stones is you're going out and you're trying to figure out where you want to settle. But when you do settle, that's when you gather
for your homes, for
for
your
your
homes.
homes. You're laying down a foundation for your new life.
I like that one.
our author Estes talks about this is a group of contrasting sayings, terms that represent all of life. And so it's not necessarily saying, if you take the agricultural interpretation, it's not necessarily saying, hey, it's good to go out and scatter stones in your neighbor's fields. What it's saying is that's part of life, that people do things because they feel put upon, or this guy's an enemy, or he's encroaching on your land, so you go scatter stones. But you gather them when it's time to plant to your own fields. The same thing, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time for war and a time for peace. How about a time to tear and a time to mend? What do you think that reference is for?
Well, a lot of times in the Jewish tradition, they don't so much rend their clothes anymore. They have a black ribbon that's torn there. Yeah. But you would tear your clothes when somebody died.
Right.
Exactly. And then at some point, you probably don't have a lot of clothes to.
Then
So
you had to have a sewing circle.
Well, the flip side of it is, of course, if you have a time to tear or to rend your clothing when somebody dies or when you're in sorrow, then the other thing is that part of life in that time period was that you would take old garments and you mend them, you'd sew them together.
Yeah.
You didn't just throw things away. You didn't give them to Salvation Army.
Well, it's not like they had a lot of clothes to, like we do, or a lot of us do.
Exactly.
I got another idea for that one.
Go ahead.
You know how when you keep your mouth shut because you don't want to hurt their feelings or whatever, sometimes you need to speak your mind. But then sometimes you need to, come together, discuss it, and then come together.
Yeah. And certainly there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn and a time to dance.
And that's what the famous movie was all about.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was what, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The famous movie, you know what movie? This Ecclesiastes.
Footloose.
Really?
Yeah.
They didn't want to mend.
He convinced the preacher dad to let them
Yeah.
have a high school dance from this scripture.
Yeah. So anyhow, there have been some references to a song by the Byrds.
Or Pete Seeger.
So I thought it was Bob Dylan. I thought it was done. I think
Well,
Bob
he was
Dylan.
the one that said it was Pete Seeger.
I didn't know that he came. Well,
Who wrote it?
I know
Pete
he
Seeger
came
put
first.
it
I
to
think he
music.
sang it first.
Oh, okay. Well,
Right.
Dylan, supposedly Dylan sang it, recorded it just before the Byrds did, but the Byrds version was
Better.
released first.
Yeah, but-
So I
It's
brought
like,
you a
you know,
little music this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
The one that writes it doesn't necessarily be the one that makes the pop.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Jimmy Driftwood and Johnny Work.
Okay. Well,
There is a time for everything
well,
and a season for every activity.
that was the reader who was. So, yeah.
Everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a
one other thing one other comment on this as a side note is that many of the biblical scholars believe that language of that section is different from the rest of the Ecclesiastes. And in fact, they attribute it more to a Persian influence, which doesn't negate its value. But from now on, when you hear that song, think of Ecclesiastes, don't think about the birds or the singer or anybody else. Okay.
So there are multiple voices being heard throughout Ecclesiastes, or at least
Yes.
two.
Yes. Probably at least three.
Mhm.
This section, the very beginning and end section, and then the middle section. Oh, wait, that's not where I wanted to go. I want to go back up here. Okay, let's just take Ecclesiastes 1:9. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. I just went through and selected a few favorites, some of which correspond with what you folks have talked about. I like that one, except I think it's not entirely true. How is it not true?
It's like they had quantum computers at that time.
Yeah, they probably didn't. They didn't have AI. They didn't have computers, period. Although they did have computers in the sense of the abacus and things of that sort.
It's assuming a cyclical nature of time, which is true to some degree, but we think of time as linear.
Yeah. Well, and I think tying in with that cyclical aspect, often history does repeat itself.
Mhm.
You see repetition. And I want to point out that one phrase there, nothing new under the sun. Throughout Ecclesiastes, that phrase about under the sun appears. And many people have interpreted that as being earthly, our earthly existence. So just keep that in mind as we go on later on and talk about other topics, including resurrection. Okay.
I think that with that scripture, it kind of is true because we do repeat ourselves a lot. We just find new ways to do it.
Okay.
So
New
we find
technology.
new technology, new ways to hurt each other, new ways to do things, but it all is repeated in a way. And you can kind of see that in our mass media. We like to recycle all the old stories.
Yeah.
We like to, do that. We like to go to war about the same old things and just find new ways to hurt each other.
Any other comments on this one?
Well, you said how it was a Persian influence. I just I went back and discovered Queen Esther, who was actually married to a Persian king, so that could have been where the influence came from. Because the book was written long after Esther.
Well, and the Jews were under the dominion of the Persian Empire for a while too, so that could be. Okay. Let's just go in order. Let's try 1, 3 to 4, and 12 to 13. This is interesting because in the earlier first chapter, it says, "What does anyone gain from all their labor at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever."
Mhm.
Well, maybe.
We hope so. And then at the very end, part of the conclusion is, "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of every human being." So we mentioned that earlier, that fear God and keep his commandments. Reactions to those two verses from Ecclesiastes.
Well, when I think of,
No, go ahead.
when I think of laborers, I'm thinking that they're doing their work, providing sustenance for them, the community and their family. But in the long run, we're gonna keep doing it. And hopefully we're not gonna kill the earth. But I agree with the end of it.
Right.
By fearing God, whatever you define fear as, and keeping his commandments, is the duty of us all. But that makes for a better world.
Okay. Ryan?
What I was going to say, though I like Coral's comments there. I was going to say each of those statements one can agree with, but connecting them is it's not inevitable. It could be a non sequitur going from A to B.
Okay.
It could also that could reflect my secular influences, but you know, what good is our labors in the end, and like, but fear God, and do what you need to. And, so it's interesting. I guess that's my initial comment.
Well, what you need to remember, of course, and you're very correct, there is a discontinuation between the two. But the verses 3 and 4 of the first chapter, that's the beginning. He's posing the question. He's trying to figure out the answers to what he perceives as much of life being meaningless or vapor. And the very end is from chapter 12, where it's, I think my reference is wrong. I don't think that's a dash. I think it should be a colon in between the 12 and 13.
Okay, they're not the same chapter.
They're not the same chapter, right? So it's the very end, it's the conclusion. After he's gone through all the discussion of and all the questioning about life being meaningless, he comes up with this conclusion that the real meaning in life is to fear God. And again, the Jews would say to have reverence for God and to keep his commandments.
Mhm.
And the non-Jew, the Gentile, would say fear of judgment. So
It's kind of the lesson of Job, then, right? I mean, it's the same thing where it's like, no matter what Job did, he did everything right, and he still got punished because God decided to have a little test, to see how faithful he was going to be.
Or Moses. I mean, Moses tried to do everything right.
Mhm.
Then he messed up by doing not striking the rock the certain way or something to that. And he didn't get to go into the promised land. It's like, okay, you made me go through all these trials. You made me pretty much destroy the home I did. The person I consider my brother, I didn't question it, but I'm not going to get to go to the promised land.
Yeah.
Because he struck a rock out of frustration.
Human wisdom, it's like Karen's quote on her fridge, It doesn't matter, because really what matters is God and heaven.
eternity.
And that's hard one for me. I disagree with these guys. And
Well-
Because everybody innately wants to have a purpose in life
yeah,
Right.
and to make a difference and have a legacy.
we want our life to have meaning.
Well, I guess another way to look at it, sorry, I'm speaking a lot today, but another way to look at it is, what do you want to anchor yourself to? And if you anchor yourself to things that are fleeting, well, there you go. But if you anchor yourself to something eternal, which is God, your destiny is with God.
It reminds me of that old nursery song. There was the foolish man who built his household among the sand, and then the wise man who had a strong foundation. So when he was talking about just anchoring yourself in the stuff that's fleeting, reminds me of the foolish man who built his house among the sand versus the guy who had a strong foundation, had a strong relationship with God.
Yeah,
But
I get that.
eventually the house built among the sand is going to get washed away.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, the anchor part.
And then I was thinking that, okay, you want your life to have meaning, and Moses went through all that because he did things out of frustration, doesn't mean that your life was without meaning. It may not be the meaning you wanted,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. And there's another thought I want to include here is that both Job and Ecclesiastes really are refuting the retribution theology, the idea that good people are always rewarded, bad people are punished. And so again, here it's saying, the good prosper sometimes, but sometimes they don't. The bad are punished sometimes, but sometimes they're not. Well, this is, I put these two together to lead up to another song. I have to have you endure one more song. This one's a Christian, contemporary Christian song, and it reflects these two verses as well as several others. And it really is a good summary of Ecclesiastes. So let's give it a try. It's called Meaningless.
I work and I toil when I sow in the soil I reap. I plant and I build and I tend to the fields and I sleep. Wealth I have gained, I've acquired some fame, but I grieve. Adventures I seek, I indulge in all things, but I still weep. All is vanity, as far as I can see. All is vanity. And now it's clear to me that generations come and generations go. The young never consider that they will be old. The sun rises and falls, highs and lows, again and again as history unfolds. And if I chase the wind, if I follow the sun, I discover the place that I started from. If the pleasures I seek are just of my flesh, I am left to conclude all is meaningless. Evil in the hearts of men, they strive after foolishness night and day, seeking power, glory, pride, but in the end we all just lie in the grave. All is vanity, as far as I can see. All is vanity. And now it's clear to me that generations come and generations go. The young never consider that they will be old. The sun rises and falls, highs and lows, again and again as history unfolds. And if I chase the wind, if I follow the sun, I discover the place that I started from. If the pleasures I seek are just of my flesh, I am left to conclude all is meaningless. I've concluded I'll fear the Lord and keep His commandments. I've concluded that I'll fear the Lord and keep His commandments. I've concluded I'll fear the Lord and keep His commandments. I've concluded I'll fear the Lord and keep His commandments. 'Cause generations come and generations go. For now I am young, but soon I'll be old. The sun rises and falls, as the wind blows again and again and again and again and again. And if I chase the wind, if I follow the sun, I discover a place that I started from. If the pleasures I seek just of my flesh, I am left to conclude all is meaningless.
Reactions, comments?
It's a good song. It's not as catchy as the other one, but I like it.
Well, and I like how he used the word vanity.
Yeah.
You know, his meaningless is harder for me, but vanity I get.
Well, I think it's important that he goes through, you know, all the meaningless things that we do in life. And what he finally concludes is, I'm going to praise the Lord and keep his commandments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where the satisfaction is, being the kind of person you're called to be. Other comments? Back row.
We're all asleep.
That's what I was afraid of. I was afraid the music was putting you to sleep.
Handbook was soothing them.
Yeah.
Unless you try to read the subtitle.
Yeah.
I know, those were tiny.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, I couldn't read the words.
Yeah, they're small, but I decided not to re-record and enlarge the words.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, who had a scripture that they suggested? Maybe if I've got it up here, we can go to it. Then I'll just move along. There's no remembrance of people of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. That ties in with that generations come and generations go.
It's not true though. Well, for 99% of it, it is. I mean, who's going to remember me? I have no heirs to remember me. I'm not going to be famous. I mean, yes, we remember Jesus, we remember George Washington, we remember Alexander the Great, Cleopatra, but 99% of us are just gonna come and go.
For the wise, like a fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. I don't want this to be a bummer. I mean,
Thank you.
it's kind of like Paul started out last week. He said he did this disclaimer saying this is a very depressing chapter, but you have to get to the end. And I think what Robin was saying, you read through the first half or so.
I don't know how far I got it.
Okay.
Well, maybe you're right. It's like walking over hot coals. You don't want to linger too long on those hot coals.
Yeah.
You just want to walk across, get to the other side. And what I'm saying is that that if you only stay on one verse, it's not the whole story.
Well,
And it is,
And the rest of the story.
and
Yep.
it is better in song. I will say, if someone sang it to us, maybe we can handle it.
Well, I'm interested in going back and finding it again.
There you go.
After seeing that,
That's the point.
well, just think about me. Last week I was told that searching for knowledge will lead me to sorrow.
I know. The lady who's in school right now.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it's true to some extent. I work as a substitute teacher right now. I've been working with kids with intellectual disabilities. And while I don't know exactly what their inner life is like, I see a certain happy-go-lucky
Yeah.
innocence which all children have or should have, but these kids especially, their needs are immediate and they're not thinking about paying taxes or bills or, the complicated relationships. They're just like, oh, I get to be outside, I'm working for cookies, whatever it is. And so, yeah, not with knowledge,
Yeah,
becomes all the wonderful complexities of life and all the sorrows that go with it.
yeah. I agree with that to some extent, but seems like an awful lot of hard work for sorrow. But no, I mean, I agree that, they live in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't see them necessarily, if I do this, this will happen.
Yeah. And I should add that these students are mostly nonverbal. So a little bit frustrating for the adults.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's sorrow for you a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts go through my mind. One is, if very few of us are going to go down in history, like a John F. Kennedy or a Moses or whomever else, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a very important purpose in the people that we relate to. If I'm remembered by my grandsons, that's enough. So I think that part of it is, and the other part of it is what Coral said, something that made me think about it's the journey, not the destination. And so, we can get terribly depressed and think, oh, they're not going to remember us in 100 years. Well, we're not going to be around 100 years to care. But the people that we react to or relate to daily, if they care about us, if we care about them, isn't that enough?
We care about.
oh, thank you, I'm glad.
You might be having an impact on someone else in your class.
Yeah, well,
that you don't realize Brian's having an impact on these kids. 20 years from now, they'll be coming back saying, Mr. Valentine, you're the one that helped me do whatever.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
people
I'm
who
not
went to
saying
Margaret,
that.
for people who went to Margaret's service, something really struck me because Joe Potter was so struck by the way Margaret taught him to teach that he taught that way. And then he was telling some of us stories afterwards where he had a high school kid that put on her senior, I don't know, it was some sort of senior project. And she remembered the song she sang with her kindergarten music teacher. That's the kind of influence he had on her.
Oh, wow.
So you never know.
well, and I'm not saying that in the here and now. I'm just saying 100 years from now,
Yeah,
who's gonna know me and who's gonna care?
that's true. But that's our band.
It is,
Yeah.
it is our vanity.
Well, let's go to
The genealogists.
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's true. Then I applied myself to understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly, but I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind or a vapor. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow, and more knowledge, the more the grief.
There it is.
That's Coral's favorite verse.
Is this ignorance is bliss?
I think so.
Well, we're going to engrave that on a plaque and put it in your.
Well, you need one too, because you're also.
I know,
pursuing more
I know.
knowledge.
If you stop learning, you stop living.
Well, that's true.
You always are learning, you're always growing. But it's the little things in life. Like Girl Scouts always teach, it doesn't matter who you are, it's what you do.
Yeah.
And so that the little things that you do in life are what's important. They can forget your name, but they'll remember what you did to touch their life.
Why do you think Ecclesiastes is grouped together with Job and Psalms and Song of Songs under the heading of wisdom literature?
I think the whole concept, I don't know why it's grouped, but I think the whole essence of the book is everything have the time, but don't get caught up in knowledge because it's fleeting and some knowledge will only bring you sorrow.
Well, isn't that wisdom? Isn't that sharing wisdom?
Mhm.
I mean, it's saying, I mean, even this one talks about, well, the more you know, the more you may encounter grief. Because if you only know, if your world is very small and it's just your family and everything's going hunky-dory there, you can ignore what's happening nationally and internationally and the problems that people are having country to country. The more you know, the more you're going to be aware of grief.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
I don't think the wisdom messages don't get to know more. I think it's just
Well-
be aware that there's going to be grief coming with knowledge.
Well, and just to know, while it's nice, sometimes that is just
Yeah.
chasing the wind.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and my favorite author, Khalil Gibran, everybody knows
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite authors. He had a quote where he says that joy and sorrow are basically two sides of the same thing. So if you know joy, then you're gonna know sorrow because you're gonna have the grief of losing that joy. And so you can't have one without the other. So that's why it doesn't really bother me that I know sorrow, because that means I also knew joy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, and
I'm okay with that.
And if you have nothing but joy, what is
Yeah.
the meaning of it then?
Yeah.
I mean,
You just can't. You can't have.
Yeah.
A child can. A child can have pure joy, but
For a time.
we're tired.
Well, and you also have to look at the source of your knowledge. For some reason, Google or Googling your medical symptoms and problems pop up in your head. Like you can Google your symptoms and come out with everything's gonna die, you're gonna die and you've got cancer in like 5 seconds. But in essence,
Dr. Google.
My doctor told me not to do that.
yeah, no, a lot of people are like, please stop Googling your symptoms.
Learn that water is bad for your health.
H2O is going to die.
I did
100%.
for a life insurance company. I was taking some insurance courses, and one of it was about claims, and it was nothing but like a medical dictionary I had to read. It was like, oh, that sounds familiar. Oh, maybe I have that.
Yeah, it's a frequent problem in med school and in nursing school. As you're learning things, everybody ends up having them. And then you're like, oh wait, I really don't have that. What?
How am I still alive?
Yeah.
So it's finding the knowledge from the right places and knowing the right places.
Well, I go to WebMD.
That's still dangerous. Still dangerous. You can still get there in a couple clicks or you're gonna die from there. But you gotta know, you have to have the knowledge to know where the knowledge should come from
Yeah.
and seek out the
wisdom, you might say.
wisdom people in your life instead of just Googling everything.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10. We're not going to get through all these, but it says 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If they fall down, they can help each other up, but pity those who fall and have no one to help them up.
That's why we have the med alert.
Yeah.
Everybody get your life alerts on.
Life alert. There you go. Life alert.
Well, I mean, that sounds like wisdom. It's better to have somebody to back you up, somebody to work with.
Mhm. And I think it was in the New Testament somewhere, recommending when missionaries go out, they go 2 by 2.
Yeah.
I was thinking that same too. We still have that rule in our church.
Yeah. For administrations and
Everything
things
is
of that
2 by
sort.
2.
Yeah.
Everything.
Exactly.
But it also speaks to me of community, not just a one-on-one pickup,
Yes.
but the reason you have a community
Mhm.
is so when you fall down, somebody might notice.
Okay, we'll jump to 5, 12, and 13. The sleep of laborers is sweet, whether they eat little or much, but the abundance of the rich permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, well ported to the harm of its owners. What do you think of that? Don't get rich?
Tell Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
don't keep it all to yourself.
Yeah.
Share it. So maybe you weren't so gluttonous.
I don't know about you folks, but my wife and I took a walk. We worked in the yard. We did all this stuff to clean up around the house. Got back and fell asleep at 6 o'clock. So I agree with that. Sleep of believers is sweet. So,
Did you sleep through the night?
only until about 5.
Wow.
That's what you always do though. I get emails from Jonathan at 5 a.m.
I keep forgetting I'm not the only one who's I'm retired. You're not. Is the whole point. So
I know I get in trouble with my HOA because I don't pay attention to what time I
yeah.
send a text. And one of them has it by her bed, so she wakes up like,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Well, let's try something from chapter 7. Do not pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant, and I inserted co-workers, friends, cursing you.
Don't eavesdrop.
Yeah.
That's wisdom.
Is that wisdom?
That's practical wisdom.
Yeah, I'll do one more. We won't get all the way through this, but do 9:17. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of a group of fools. So
A little contradictory. He just told us not to be wise.
No, he told us not to.
not to focus on wisdom. I
Yeah,
think.
well, not to,
Does
that
he-
pursuing education or knowledge was,
No, he used the word wisdom.
oh, well, that's,
I'm going to click through a whole bunch of these real quick because I want to show you one slide. This is all the stuff you don't get to hear about. This is the next book. And it's Jesus' first century rabbi. And it's interesting because it's written by a rabbi, and he talks about Christianity and Judaism, that we have so much in common that we shouldn't be at each other's throats, that we ought to be learning from each other, and that because they accept Jesus in one way and we accept him in another, doesn't necessarily mean we have to have a battle about it.
yeah.
So I'm not sure. I assume that next week we'll go on to Song of Songs. And then sometime pretty quick here, we're going to get into Jesus, first century rabbi. So if you want a copy, I'll leave this up for a little bit, but you can get it from Amazon, you can get it from Christian Books. I keep checking half price books and I don't see it there, but it's worth checking. You know, just go in
The
anywhere.
library might have copies.
The library might have
It does
copies
have
also.
copies.
So,
It does?
and Abe Books has a bunch that are used that are even cheaper than the
Yeah.
prices I've listed up there. So, okay.
It is not pretty.
Oh,
Well, thank you very much. There's a lot more in Ecclesiastes. Go and read the whole thing, but don't do it after you've had tragedy in life.